believe that money can give you experiences and choices and freedom. Yeah, jinx. So I would say, first of all, become aware of what it is you think you feel about money. And then it's about changing your language around money. So notice the phrases that you constantly say and find ways to change them, because our words and how we feel and think become our actions. So if you're constantly saying to your friends, oh, I'm so poor, I'm so broke, I'm so poor, you're going to end up living in that cycle of telling yourself you're poor, so then maybe spending money really quickly, or not, you're going, oh, I'm bad with money anyway. You end up acting the things you say. So if you can start to change the things you say, and you don't have to suddenly go, oh, I'm rich, I'm so wealthy, you know, if you don't believe it, but you can start to say, I'm learning to be good with money, or I'm, you know, I am managing my money well. You know, it's about changing, using affirmations, basically changing your language from negative to positive, so that you can start to rewrite how you think and feel about money. And it starts with your words.
I think that the phrase "I'm broke" is so popular, but it's so not true, because as a human, you're not broke. You keep telling yourself, I'm broke, I'm broke, I'm broke. But it's not true. Like, you're not broken. You're fine. Like, you're whole. You're still yourself, but you're having like difficulties with managing money. So it's more about like self-awareness, as you said, about money. And I've read a book called Be a Badass at Making Money.
I've literally just finished reading that. Jensen
Really? I love it.
Amazing
I love
book.
it so much. And that's the kind of book that you can come back like a million times and learn something new every time. And I love that at the end of every chapter, you have to do some things around money. And it actually really works. It opens your mind.
Yeah. And money. I think the thing is that we forget how powerful like our thoughts are.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have subconscious thoughts and patterns of thinking you don't realize you have. And one of the best ways to uncover that is by like journaling and getting your words out on paper, so you can start to see what your patterns are. But our thoughts are so powerful, and they're you know, you think something before you do it. So it's about changing the way you think. Obviously, if you are in, you know, loads of debt, and you're in a lot of financial difficulty, it is about seeking out the practical help. But if you're constantly telling yourself, oh, I'll never get out of debt, that's where you're blocking yourself. It's about believing, oh no, I can get out of debt. Yeah, it might take me 10 years, but I have to believe and be motivated that I can actually change the course of my life by doing the practical and also the mindset work. I think that's important.
So let's say that there is someone who's like having multiple credit cards, overdrafts, debts, and is on minimum wage. What steps should they take to get out of that debt and just do something about it? Like start saving and investments. Where should they go? What should they do?
So it's, you know, it's really personal, because it's personal finance. And depending on somebody's situation and depending on how much debt it is and what kind of debt, sometimes it's more important that you use your money, you split it to optimize it so that you start saving whilst paying off debt at the same time. If your debt isn't really high interest. If it's really high interest, then obviously you want to take a look at maybe trying to clear that first, so that you're not being charged loads and wasting money. So you have to weigh it up a little bit. And there's loads of different calculators and stuff online that can help with that. But it's not just about cutting back and restricting and trying to clear the debt. It's also about trying to increase your income and finding ways maybe to make extra money, whether that's, you know, getting a side hustle or a second job, or trying to get in a job that's got a higher income, you know, salary. So it's about combining the two, trying to reduce your expenses and what you're spending money on, basically, and trying to increase your income. And the combination of the two is what's important. It's not one or the other. And sometimes that, I think, can feel really overwhelming, because it's, you know, if you feel like you don't have any skills, or if you feel like you're stuck in a job you don't know how to get out of. But it's a long-term process, you know, like I think depending on how much debt and what kind of debt it is will really depend on the best action to take. You know, like I said, depending whether it's high interest or not.
I think it can be quite discouraging, especially at the beginning, if you think about, oh, it's a long-term plan, like it can take literally years to pay everything off, but we should never feel discouraged by that, because even if we pay monthly a little bit, it still gets us somewhere, you know, it's better than nothing.
Yeah, totally. Right? And it's definitely better to start small. And I say that about saving, investing, clearing debt. It's better, like everybody has to start somewhere. So if you can put a plan in place where you say, right, you know what, I did spend the last few years spending money on a credit card, not really thinking about my finances and my financial future. Don't beat yourself up for the position that you now find yourself in, because it's not actually going to achieve anything, right? It's just, so it's about saying, okay, you know what, let's figure out where I'm at, let's lay all the numbers out, let's take a look at it all and create a plan. And you can either do that yourself, or if you find it too overwhelming, maybe you could work with like a coach or you know, somebody online, and then making a plan so you can say, right, I know that if I pay off £50 a month for the next 3 years, I will be debt free. And give yourself like a date and a goal in mind. Now, ideally, maybe over that 3 years, you might come into a little bit of money, you might be able to get a bit of a pay rise, you might be able to reduce your expenses, so you know that date might change. But if you can give yourself a plan and a date to work towards, and you know what you're aiming for, it helps you stay motivated, because you know what you're working towards. I think the problem sometimes when people have debt and they try to clear it is they have no clue how much debt they're in. They don't know how long it's going to take them to clear it. So money's just coming in and out of their account. And then they're like, well, what's the point? Because I don't know what it's going to be. I'm in debt anyway. Whereas if you can make an actual plan, it kind of makes you feel a bit better about what it is that you're doing.
It makes you feel in control of your money.
Yeah. And I think that's important, like feeling in control, because if the feeling of feeling out of control of your money can cause stress. And, you know, it's not actually about how much money you have or how much money you're making, because, you know, there's articles and podcasts and God knows what else about people who make £100,000 a year, but their expenses are so high because of, you know, lifestyle creep, and they're sending their kids to a more expensive school, they're going to more expensive restaurants, or their rent's higher. Even though they're making more money, they're still just as stressed as the people who make £20,000 a year, because of the way they manage the money. And they go, I don't really know where my money's going. So it's not actually about how much, it's more about what you're doing with what you've got. And the more you can feel in control, the better.
Yeah. Why do you think that people spend more than they have? Because that's very common as well. Like, people buy things that they don't really need.
I think that in society, we're told that we constantly need to fix ourselves, right? We've always got these adverts on Instagram, online. Buy this. There's always a solution to a problem that we think that we have.
But that's how the marketing works. Like, they want you to see the result of the product. When you're gonna get the product, that's the result that you're gonna get, which is obviously not true.
Yeah, and I think that there's a complete range. Everybody does it different, like for different reasons. I think the societal problem is to do with like consumerism and being told that we always need to fix a problem. We always need what somebody else has. I think that on a more individual level, a lot of the time people spend money to try and change their emotion. So we think that it will make us feel better. So kind of emotional and impulse spending, right? If you're feeling lonely, oh, maybe I'll just shop and I'll buy myself a new outfit. If you're feeling sad, you know, whatever emotion it is, usually we get a little bit of a kick out of spending money. And when we make financial decisions, we don't actually make them from a place of logic. We make them from our emotional brain. So usually, even if you've laid out all the numbers and you go, right, I know I've only got £100 to spend this month, logically you've only got £100 to spend. But in the moment, when you're feeling and you're triggered by a certain emotion, the emotion is the thing that will make you spend the money, not the logic. Because then once you've spent it, and after you go, oh, I know that I only had £100. Why did I just buy a £200 bag? You know, I knew that I shouldn't do that, but why did I do it? And we always question ourselves. But it's because you're spending and you're making decisions from a place of emotion as opposed to logically, basically.
Yeah. It's called retail therapy, isn't it?
Yeah. And sometimes, you know what? Sometimes it does help. Every
It
now and
does,
again,
yeah.
you buy something and you go, actually, that really did help. But it's the constant ongoing cycle of spending more than you have because of trying to change your emotional state that causes the issues. And that's about consequences, yeah. And then it is, you know, like there's loads of stats and research that shows the connection between money and mental health, and how if you have poor mental health, it can really affect your finances. But if you're having issues with your finances, it can also give you make you have poor mental health. And if you fall into that cycle, each one is kind of a downward spiral, basically, because it's a perpetuating cycle of emotion and spending. So it's about understanding the impact that finances can have on how we feel and our well-being, and putting systems in place to make sure that we're managing our money in a way that is going to help our, you know, mental health, not make it worse. And sometimes, you know, like, especially because of the pandemic, people have been in a position where they've worried about money, not been able to, you know, been worried about their jobs, or maybe have lost their jobs. But then because of social media and being on our phones, you are then sold like, well, this will make you feel better. So it can be a bit, you've got to have a lot of discipline and willpower, also practical tools in place to help you not kind of get into that trap.
I remember back in the days, I would like buy something based on my emotions, and then I would be like very short with money at the end of the month, which would give me an anxiety, and I was in that vicious cycle of like trying to soothe my emotions with the new stuff, but then feeling anxious again at the end of the month for not having money again. And I was in that for such a long time, and it's so bad for your mental health, and I felt very affected by the money.
Yeah, and I think that we know that logically
we do that,
yes. Yeah, and like you say, you're very aware of the fact that if you got to the end of the month and didn't have much money, it would make you feel really anxious. However, in that moment when you're feeling a certain emotion, you're not thinking about the future and the future you in 2 weeks' time with no money. You're thinking about present you who wants to buy a takeaway or buy yourself a new dress. And everybody's brain works differently and will need different things to help them avoid that cycle. So, for example, some people would need to use a budgeting method where they're handling in cash, you know, like it's quite old school, but they might need that. Or one thing I recommend is like having a specific spending account so that you can see in front of you the numbers. And like in Monzo, for example, it's got the dials that shows you how much you can and can't spend, or how much you should and shouldn't spend, like basically it goes green, amber, and then red. And if that might be helpful for some people, or, you know, there's so many different things that you can do that might help you, but they're practical tools. When it comes to the emotional, one thing that I always recommend is people keeping like a money diary.
Okay. What does it mean?
So every time you're spending money on anything, you keep a track of it. So you might do it in your phone, you could write it down. I prefer to write it down because I think it's better when you do it by hand. And you say what you've bought, how much it was, how you were feeling. So like basically the trigger around buying it, like the reason for buying it, basically. And you just keep a track of it for like a few weeks. And the simple act of doing that and being able to look back and understand where your money is going, what your triggers are, why you're buying certain things, you can start to see patterns and be like, oh, I always really spend loads of money on that when it doesn't actually bring me any joy. I do it because it's a habit, or I do it because I find that I get quite sad, or because I'm on my period and I know that I get sad. And then what you can do is go, right, I know that being sad is my trigger. So what I need to do is when I'm feeling sad, I need to have coping mechanisms that don't include spending money. So it's about figuring out what brings you joy or makes you happy or changes your emotional state without you immediately reaching for your credit card.
Oh, that's right.